Good morning, guys, and welcome to another episode of Costa Rica Real Estate and Investments. This is episode 55 with me, your host, Richard Beckson. Today, we're going to be talking with Todd Cutter. If you guys remember, we've actually spoken to Scott Cutter. That's his brother. Todd is also top broker and co-owner with his brother, Scott, of Two Costa Rica Real Estate. You guys are probably aware that Scott's down in the Mount Antonio area. Todd is actually in the Central Valley here. So San Jose, Alajuela, Heredia, those guys are based over in Escazu, but they are experts in everything that's here in the Central Valley. So we're going to be talking today about the Central Valley real estate, but I really wanted to talk to them about this auctions of properties that these guys are involved into, how it works. And I know quite a few of you will probably be interested in this, just because, again, I think there are great deals to be had on some of these auctions, on some of these luxury properties. Remember, guys, if you have any questions for me, you can email me, info@investingcostarica.com. That's info@investingcostarica.com. Remember, if you guys like this podcast, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and also for anyone listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, please give us a great review. Let's get straight into it. Good morning, Todd. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, Richard. Great to be here. How about yourself?
Yeah, very, very good. I really appreciate you coming on the show. As I mentioned in the intro there, we've spoken to Scott twice on the podcast, but it's an absolute pleasure to have you on it.
Likewise, for me, it's a pleasure. I've been following the podcast since the inception, so glad you've been keeping yourself busy during COVID.
Yeah, I got to do something to keep myself busy, otherwise I'll go nuts. But hey, it's been a crazy year, and it doesn't look like that next year is even gonna, it's gonna slow down. I think it may even just be, even more crazier. But I mean, I always like to ask people, like, what has surprised you really in the last 6 months? But also, I mean, are there any trends that you're beginning to see?
Yeah, good question. I mean, I think all of us in the real estate and the luxury real estate segment were pretty surprised by how quickly the market changed in Costa Rica. Obviously, with the airport being closed for so long, things were shut down, and really, when that airport opened, it was a free for all. And I think we were all expecting increased demand, but we really didn't realize how much pent up demand there was. And I think a lot of that had to do, obviously, with U.S. market conditions, COVID, people really learning to appreciate more green space, fresh air, the ability to get out and about, be outside and adventure activities. And of course, Costa Rica has so many of those ingredients that make that appeal for people. And so while we expected it, we didn't think it would hit so quickly. I'd say that over the past 6 months, things that have surprised me is really the sustainability of how that demand and growth has continued. I think we saw boom in most of our beach locations very quickly, starting in November and really through, March. And we expected that to slow, and really it's only increased in most of those destinations, really turning the market from what has historically been a buyer's market much more into a seller's market in much of our coastal destinations. And that's really been the biggest change in our market, and really helping our clients, both buyers and sellers, maneuvering between, how to sell in a seller's market, when to sell, and then from the buyer's perspective as well, when to buy, how to buy, what the right opportunities are. And so it's been a unique opportunity, I think, for our agents to kind of shift and pivot and really learn to better service our clients on both ends of the transaction.
I mean, are there any particular trends recently that you're seeing? I mean, again, you're based in kind of the Escazu, the Central Valley, but I mean, you guys are based all over Costa Rica. I mean, you have an amazing, setup with it, network with great people as well. I know Dina, Jen, you guys have great people working with you.
Yeah, it's always been the core of our company, really, is the best people. We really believe that we have the best agents, and we've got to give them the best brokerage and the best tools. And so we've worked really hard on that, and proud of the family that we've kind of accumulated across the country. And so I'd say trends, as you mentioned, I'm in the Central Valley, so I'll talk briefly about some trends maybe in the Central Valley, and then touch on some big picture trends we're seeing out on the coast as well. In the Central Valley, again, COVID had its impact, and I'll try not to use that word again over this podcast. I know everybody's tired of hearing it, but it is inevitable, of course, to mention. And the impact here was, we saw so much movement towards larger homes, places with home offices, places with larger gardens, private pools, places where people could really be outside in their own home and enjoy themselves without feeling restrained. And so we saw, obviously, restrictions or constriction, if you will, in condo markets very quickly at the beginning of COVID, but we're starting to see that come back now, which is nice. We're seeing vertical developments, high-rise apartments, condominiums, and things of the sort really starting to come back again as people gain a larger comfort level with higher levels of vaccination and just an overall more comfort level with living in the now. And so we're seeing that come back. But certainly we're seeing a lot more movement at the high end of the market than I would say we probably had in the past 10 years, historically in the Central Valley, because you don't see as much external demand from US and Canadian markets as we do obviously on the coastal market. It's a smaller marketplace. And so it's historically been a buyer's market in the city. And while that isn't changing, and I don't predict that to change anytime soon, certainly volume of transactions, and particularly at the higher end of things, is moving. As we go out to the coastal markets, whether it's Santa Teresa, Playas del Coco, Jacoma, San Antonio, Dominical, really all of our destination markets, we're seeing a very true shift in lifestyle purchasing. We're seeing people who, yes, they're looking for second homes and rental properties and things, but we're obviously seeing a drastic shift in people who are looking to spend more and more time, whether it's people that are going to come here and move to Costa Rica and live and work from a home, in the middle of paradise, or people that perhaps realistically know they're going to go back to the office sooner than later, but really think about living in the now and spending 2 to 3 months in a place like Costa Rica. And so we're seeing people that are a little bit less focused on, where's the income generation of that potential property. I'm looking at Manuel Antonio or in Santa Teresa or in Los Sueños or in Nativa, but I want to live there. Tell me about the house. Tell me about the lifestyle. Tell me, what are the restaurants that I'm going to eat at? And so people are paying closer attention to the affinity that they have with the destination, and a little bit less on, I would say, the potential financial upside, whether it's appreciation or the rental income. And that's an interesting shift. And obviously that's what's helping to drive, obviously, the inventory issues that we're seeing in most of our marketplaces, as people are really, particularly our buyers from Canada and the US, we're seeing a drastic shift right now, I would say, in capital and political flight. And I won't get into either side of any of those points, because those are dangerous conversations. But regardless of which side of the table people sit at, on the vaccine situation or on the political situation or on taxes in the US and things, we're seeing a tremendous volume of buyers coming into our markets from particularly Canada and the US who have those things on their mind, and for one reason or another has put Costa Rica obviously on the map, and that's really driven demand tremendously on the coast.
Yeah, I mean, I've been having meetings all morning about this QR code, so that's about to implement here for tourism. So it's going to be interesting.
I think interesting is a great description, and we'll leave it at that.
Yes, exactly. But so, I mean, you've described a little bit. I mean, again, as you mentioned there, you're kind of based in Escazu, Santa Ana. I mean, for a lot of people, these are just words that are listening to this podcast. I mean, describe the area. What's the community like? What's there to do? What's the climate like? Because, we always say Central Valley probably has the best climate in the world.
Yep. Yeah, great question. I mean, I think what we find obviously in the real estate industry is, 95% of our foreign, expat clientele, and frankly, the Costa Rican clientele for the most part, if they're living in the city, the regions of Escazu, Santa Ana, and the western suburb are always the strongest appeal. And it's very easy to understand why. This area is kind of tucked up against the western suburbs, tucked up against the mountains. So you've got easy access to mountains in addition to beautiful views and looking at the mountains, but you got easy access to hiking trails. There's a lot of mountain biking here. There's a lot of outdoor adventure activities. And then, the Escazu Santa Ana area is really, a suburb like many suburbs in the US. There is the finest in international dining, whether it's Peruvian, whether it's steak, whether it's international, Chinese food, whatever you want, and all of the good, the bad, and the ugly about the franchises from, P.F. Chang's to Starbucks to Crate and Barrel. All of those things are all here in the center of Escazu. And it's a great lifestyle. The weather here, as you touched on, is fabulous. You're talking about probably average temperatures around 85 degrees year round. The low temperatures at night may be, on the coldest day, would be in the high 60s. And so, great weather, great climate, great access to all of the amenities and comfort creatures, if you will, that we're all used to if we come from other places. And so certainly both the local population who's gotten accustomed and really to enjoy those things, and certainly for an expat, whether it's an expat coming from abroad or maybe it's someone who owns property at the beach and spends partial time up here in the city, great place to go out for entertainment, culture, fine dining, live music, you name it, it's all here.
Yeah, I mean, you're an hour and 15 minutes, an hour and 30 minutes from the beach. So I mean, for anybody that's looking for the best of both worlds, I mean, you can live in the city, and I mean, and we say city, I mean, it's there's not that many high rises. I mean, this is not like a typical city that people are used to here. I mean, everything's kind of spread out. You have these mountain ranges all around, kind of the Central Valley. So, I mean, if you want stunning views and tons of land, you can have that. If you want to live in the hustle and bustle, you can have that as well.
Correct. And it's really interesting. Each of the areas is very well defined. I mean, you mentioned Escazu, Santa Ana, it based, one abuts the next, and they're 2 minutes apart. And if you want to live, as you mentioned, if you're really interested in views, then people seek the mountains of Escazu because they overlook the valley and the entire city. Typically a little cooler temperatures with a little bit more of a breeze on the mountains. If you want a little warmer climate, you don't want the cool, then the Santa Ana areas to go. And then really up and coming area, if you look towards Brasil de Mora and Ciudad Colón, as you continue to head west towards the coast, you find what I would call a little bit more authentic and less Western influence in those towns. And you're finding a lot of our US and Canadian clients really enjoying out there because they can live up in the hillside and enjoy those views, but kind of walk into more Costa Rican feel in the town. And as obviously Escazu Santa Ana has much more of that US and Western influence.
Very well said, sir. Very well said. So, well, let's get in the main topic. I've been watching you guys Facebook, as I like to do. But anyway, luxury real estate auctions. I've seen that you guys have got into this. What is it? How does it work? And why do you think people listening would be interested?
Yep. Great question. And I would say I'm used to answering the naysayers and the doubters on this. I was one of them many years ago when I was first introduced to our auction partner, Concierge Auctions, through our network at Escazu and Luxury Real Estate. I had a hard time believing that the auction process, while I had followed it in the US, I had a hard time believing that process would work here in Costa Rica. We took part in our first auction as the listing agent about 4 years ago, and have subsequently done 5 auctions with Concierge Auctions, all been very successful. And so to get into a little bit how the auction process works, I mean, many of you have probably seen or heard or witnessed, whether TV or in live, any type of auction from cars to livestock to real estate. And the principle behind the auction is you're basically allowing the market to determine the price. You're having a seller who is committed to the process contractually, putting his property up, and you have buyers who are committed to the process. You have a seller. Why would a seller put their property up on the auction? I think the biggest misconception is that the only sellers that would place their properties up to auction are people who are in desperate situations and they haven't been able to sell their property and they don't know what else to do. And so they've given up and said, just give me whatever it is. And that's probably the least likely seller of an auction. Those are not the typical sellers. Typical sellers are people who place a priority on, number one, liquidity. Number two, defining a fixed date of sale. And number three, of course, having a competitive range of bidders from all over the world with maximum marketing exposure in what I would refer to as a compressed sales cycle. So a typical sales cycle for a luxury property in Costa Rica, outside of maybe the craziness that we're living right now, could range anywhere from a month to a year in many cases, depending on how high up the scale you go in the price range. And basically at the auction, there is a marketing period of 4 to 6 weeks where to Costa Rica, our company is, along with our auction partner Concierge, will do aggressive marketing both in Costa Rica, globally, as well as take advantage of both our database and Concierge database of about 750,000 millionaires and billionaires. And you're placing more eyes than a seller will ever be able to have on their property in a very shortened amount of time. And so obviously what that creates is a sense of urgency, which is very difficult to achieve oftentimes in the luxury real estate market. And it defines, because there is a defined date of sale and there are defined conditions on how to participate in that auction, it really creates an excitement and a frenzy around the property that, of course, benefit the seller because they're getting a competitive market, and it benefits the buyers for obvious reasons because they have the opportunity to determine what they think the property is worth. The question that many ask is, well, how cheap can I get it, and what percentage under market value am I going to be able to buy that property if it's listed at 2 million? What's the average? And what my response always to that is, the auction doesn't generate percentage values under market. The auction typically generates market value. And the only people that determine market value are not the seller and are not our company or any other brokers, it's the market. And so obviously the unique condition of an auction unlike a property on the open market, is that the amount of bidders and the bidders really control that process. So if you go into an auction and there's two bidders, well, you're going to have a higher probability, of being able to control your destiny. And of course, in the auction, you can pull out whenever you want. So for the buyer, there's really no risk in participating. If the bids get too competitive or go above your ceiling of comfort, you simply stop bidding and you will lose the auction, and the deposit that you will have already made will get refunded to you. So it's really a no risk situation for the buyers to participate, but it's a unique opportunity for them, I would say, to determine their price.
Well, I mean, Todd, just to give us an idea, I mean, as you mentioned there, you've done a couple of these before. I mean, without divulging anything that you can't, I mean, give us an example of one that was successful and maybe one that was not so successful, just because I'm sure a lot of sellers are probably going to be intrigued and a lot of buyers are going to be intrigued as well.
Absolutely. And as you said, I mean, the auctions generate different results, and oftentimes it's timing, oftentimes it's the type of property. Obviously, right now with the demand we're seeing from a U.S. and Canadian market, the auctions have been very successful recently because there is just simply a lot of demand for the type of properties that we're putting up at auction. The first auction that we did here, which was about 4 years ago, was actually a property in Los Sueños. It was a seller who, as I mentioned, had no financial need. The property had actually never been on the market, but had been along in Costa Rica for long enough to know that he didn't want to wait for a year or 2 years. And he just wanted liquidity, wanted to sell. He didn't want to show his property 100 times over the course of a year. And we put his property up. We had told the seller prior to the auction that we estimated liquid value, not necessarily list price, but we had suggested liquid value in the range of about $1.7 million to $1.8 million. We put the property up for auction when the opening bids were launched, which is about 1 week prior to the auction. And I'll get into how the process works and the requirements in just a minute. I think the highest bid that day was somewhere between $950,000 and $1.2 million. At the end of the auction, the property sold for $1.73 million. So the last 45 seconds of the auction, the property value, increased almost 100% in that last few minutes. But as I like to point out to the seller and sellers and buyers, at the end of the day, what we obtained there was what we had predicted for market value. I won't tell you that the seller didn't want 2.1 or 2.2 for it. Of course. As we all, but we had, I think, 7 bidders in that process, and it revealed the market value. When bidders are not willing to continue, it shows that they're not perceiving value anymore. So in order to participate in the auction, just so the folks who are listening understand, for participation, all bidders are required to place a $100,000 non-refundable deposit. It's refundable, of course, if they don't win the auction, but if they win the auction, that $100,000 is non-refundable. They have to provide a bank letter showing proof of funds for the entire balance between whatever their opening bid was and that $100,000. They have to also sign the auction agreement, which details all of the process of the auction. They have to pre-approve the purchase and sales agreement, pre-approve the documents that are uploaded prior to the auction for the due diligence process. We uploaded an inspection report, the legal information, the survey map, and all of the details, and they have to pre-approve all that. So from a seller's perspective, and for you, Richard, who's got plenty of experience in Costa Rica, for a seller in Costa Rica to have a group of pre-qualified financial bidders who are placing non-refundable deposits, who are pre-approving due diligence, who are showing bank funds with proof of funds for the entire purchase property or the purchase price, and are of course approving already a contract that can't be negotiated with their attorneys after the fact. That's a very enticing offering.
Yes.
And of course, for the buyers, the opportunity is obvious. They have no risk. They can pull out whenever they want. If the bids get too high, they can pull out. And they have a seller who has committed to selling with no floor. There is no minimum bid. And so, that's the question I always get. Well, what happens if the property sells well below the seller's price? Well, that's the seller's risk at participating in an auction. There is one point in the auction early on in the process where the seller will have one opportunity to walk away from the auction and cancel that auction, but that's 1 week prior to auction when those opening bids, the company provides an opening bid incentive for anybody who bids between, for example, the auction that we have right now on the block is a property in Nativa. It's almost a 14,000 square foot home, and that's on the market at $1.949 million. So 7 days prior to the auction, all those bids that are sealed up until that time will be revealed to the seller, and he'll have one opportunity to cancel the auction. If he moves forward at that moment, then he is committed contractually and bound to selling the property to the highest bidder, regardless of price. The auction company provides a 6% incentive for anyone who bids prior to that cutoff deadline, because of course it's in the seller's best interest to be able to have some gauge of where his worst case scenario may be, and that is revealed to him that day. There is a 12% buyer's premium that buyers will pay in order to participate in the auction. Therefore, the incentive of the 6%, that's why, of course, it behooves all bidders to participate early and put their bids in prior to that cutoff date, so that they lower their financial exposure, obviously, and it's an important part of the financial exposure. And so for the seller, it's really a no-risk opportunity to have the best possible market conditions revealed to them. And for the buyers, it's a no-risk scenario for them. Yes, they have to place a deposit and show proof of funds and fill out a contract, but if they don't win the auction, their money is immediately returned to them, and it gives them an opportunity to buy a property in Costa Rica at a price that they determine. Well, as you mentioned, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I mean, I think for anybody that doesn't want to go through the whole process, I mean, as you mentioned there, of, listing and doing showings and, potentially keeping it on the market for, I don't know, 3, 6, 9, 12 months, but just like, look, I want out and I'm going to let the market determine what the price is. Because again, you may have a price in mind, but really your property is worth what someone's willing to pay for it. And you're going to find out really quickly in an auction how much someone's willing to pay for it.
That's exactly right. And we, even outside of the auction process, we're firm believers that the market determines values, and we tell our sellers that. And we just think that the auction, it accelerates the cycle into a 60-day cycle. Yep. Our sellers come to market the property that we placed in Nativa here at auctions that we launched last Friday. That will sell on December 17th. Okay. Period. We started the process on November 15th, and it will. Go ahead.
And no, I was just going to say, I mean, I'm just interested to hear about the Nativa one, because again, it's going to be closing on December 17th, did you say?
That's correct. So that property, we launched that property on November 17th. The auction will close, if you will, or the hammer will come down in auction terminology on December 17th. And then the winning bidder will have 30 days to close on that property. Wow. All the closings are cash closings, non-contingent, no financing, bank or owner financing available. And so the seller went to the market on November 5th. And by 45 days later, that property is under contract and sold.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a great option for anybody that just wants to sell their property quickly. I mean, as you've said there at the moment, it's a seller's market out in the coast. So if you've got a property and you want to sell it quickly, or you've potentially had some difficulty, I mean, if somebody's interested in selling with you guys via auction, or someone is interested in seeing, which properties are there, how would they see that?
If they want to see what, I'm sorry, I didn't.
No, sorry, I think we had a bit. No, basically, if someone's interested in seeing which properties you have up for auction, how would they see it?
Yeah, they can go to our website at costaricarealestate.com/auctions, and they'll be able to see what properties we have at auction. They can also go obviously directly to conciergeauctions.com, which is our auction partner, and they can see all the properties globally that are available for sale. But it's a great opportunity. I mean, we found that our sellers that participate in the process, they will never have the opportunity to have so much attention on their property at any one time. And at the end of the day, if they walk away from the auction, they will walk away from the auction with a very clear understanding of what the market will bear.
Yeah. Well, I'm just going to change gears here, Todd, because again, I think the auction is very, very interesting. I mean, especially for people that are looking to get I say a deal, but it doesn't sound like it's always a deal. I don't know, we're having some internet problems here. It's probably me. Probably the kids have jumped on the Wi-Fi here, so I apologize. But I mean, what do you have in your listings at the moment beyond the auction that you personally would invest in? What stuff do you have that you think is really interesting?
I mean, I think, as opposed to telling you which particular listing I have that I want to try to pitch on to your listeners right now, which would be very, very salesman-like of me, and I'm trying hard not to be. I think that it's hard for me. It's very difficult. But I would say that, Richard, at the end of the day, for those who are listening, and no different whether you're in the US or Canada or Europe or wherever you are, you need to engage with a real estate agent who understands and has knowledge about the market, and let them know what your investment criteria is. I mean, if you told me today, Richard, hey, I'm looking for a property that throws off X amount in ROI per year after expenses, then I'm going to push you out to the coast, and we're going to look for strong, long-term performing rental properties that we have that even through COVID, we're able to really come to the surface and show their value in markets where there is a unique property, there is a real limit in the supply side of the market. As a general rule, obviously, when you buy in large developments, you're never going to be able to control your destiny, and particularly in a seller's market on the beach. And so, that's one side of the coin. I have other buyers who are looking for lifestyle personal properties, but you really want to talk to your real estate advisor that you know and that you trust, and let them understand your criteria and let them walk through the process. In the city, there's different opportunities right now. Again, it is a buyer's market in the city. And while new construction continues to rise on the scale on a price per square meter basis, there's some tremendous values on properties that may be, 5 to 10 years old that have shown resiliency over the long term. Look to communities, obviously, that are consolidated, strong gated communities in the city, like Villarreal, like La Hacienda del Sol, Cerro Alto. The communities during the pandemic that were already consolidated only got bigger and better, and people really sought those communities out. People are looking to take a little bit less risk and want to make sure that they're buying in a property or a project that really proves them solid liquidity and equity in the long term. And I think those are all individual requirements that need an agent to bounce ideas and really a guide through the process.
Okay. Well, let me ask you this then, and I'm interested to see how you're going to answer this. If you inherited $500,000 and you had to invest into a business or real estate in Costa Rica, what would you do with it and why?
That's a great question. I'm going to scratch my head for a little bit and then I'm going to dive right in. I think, with $500,000, where would I put that money right now? I think that I would find a destination probably on the coast. If I were more apt towards the coast, I would find a destination on the coast that I can still find value. I would not venture off into what I would call unproven destinations, which is very tempting, particularly for US and Canadian investors, because in US, if you're 25 minutes outside of a suburb that's booming, you can invest there and inevitably they're going to build a Home Depot and an Applebee's, and all of a sudden you're going to be in the money. In Costa Rica, it really doesn't work like that. I would really look for proven destinations, but perhaps where there's more land available, areas perhaps in the southern zone, Dominical, Uvita, those areas come to mind, where they haven't reached premium peaks. Yes, it's still a seller's market, but there's still opportunity there, where I could find some low-hanging fruit, if you will, and purchase a good property at a good price that's got an upside both on the rental income and appreciation.
Great answer. Great answer. It's amazing sometimes people don't want to kind of let the cat out the bag on that one. So, but I think you answered that very good. Well, Todd, we'll not take up much more of your time. I know that you're very busy. I really appreciate you coming on here. Anyone that wants to speak with Todd or to learn more about the auctions, all of the contact details I'll put inside the description. But Todd, really appreciate your time, and have a great day, sir.
Yeah, likewise, Richard. Thanks for having me on. We look forward to catching up soon over lunch or coffee.
Sounds good, mate. Have a good one.
All right. Take care. Bye-bye. Bye.
Hey guys, I hope you very much enjoyed that podcast. It's going to be really interesting. I'm going to keep my eye on this auction process that they have going on there with the property down in Nativa. Just so you guys know, that property is about an hour from San Jose, kind of set within the lush rainforest there. Beautiful views. So I think it'd be worthwhile just taking a look at that. Remember, you can go to their website, tocostaricarealestate.com/auctions. And also I'll put the link in the description down below as well. Or I'm sure that you could just type in Costa Rica Real Estate. That's the number 2 Costa Rica Real Estate auctions. It's going to be very interesting to see what happens to that property valued at 1.9 million. We'll take a look and see what happens there. Again, for anybody that wants to get in contact with me, you can do info@investingcostarica.com. That's info@investingcostarica.com. Remember to subscribe, like us, and give us a great review, guys. Have a great day, and I look forward to seeing you on future podcasts.